I'm talking about Catholic marriage prep. Congratulations if you're newly engaged and you're watching this because you're wondering what your experience is going to be like. What are the different steps? Every diocesan has different requirements for getting married in the Catholic Church. I'm going to be sharing not only what the requirements were for our diocesan in Austin, Texas, but also tips that I recommend, books to read, things to study when you're preparing for marriage. Marriage is so exciting. It's such a fun time. I was one of those little girls that planned my marriage for my whole life, and it's so funny because we had a very beautiful, very over-the-top wedding. It was highly planned, but we did actually spend a lot of time spiritually preparing as well because it's such a beautiful sacrament. And one piece of advice I would give to myself going back in time is don't worry so much about the wedding. Like, honestly, it doesn't matter. It's just one day, and the ceremony itself is the best part of the whole day. That was the best part of our day. I loved it so much. It was incredible. Find a really good church and find a really good priest to marry you. Our priest, we just happened on, I did not do a lot of research. Where we live is a big young adult community, so it's actually pretty competitive to get married here. It's really hard to get dates, and we didn't want a long engagement. The church that we ended up going with ended up just being the easiest to work with. The best date was available, and that's why we got married at that church. We had also gone to that church before. That was really the driving force as to why we got married there. There were two other churches that were our home churches. I went to one, and my husband Matt went to another church that we were more interested in getting married at, but the way it all came down to, we were able to get the right date at this church, and ended up being such a huge blessing because we got this priest, Father Kyle, who we love. He is so incredible. He's such a great priest. He's young, he's just vibrant for the faith, and honestly, a young priest is not the rule of all rules. We have our home church now that we go to is different from all the churches we went to before, and the priests are older but incredible. It's an alive church. I think that's what matters the most, that the priests are really engaged with the community and really passionate about what they do and really reverent and holy. Father Kyle is just that in spades. He's incredible. We love him so much. That is part of marriage prep, is you're going to meet with this priest. When you're engaged or gonna get engaged, really start shopping around and understand what priest you want to marry you and have that ahead of time, because what's been great for us is he's become our family priest now. We don't go to the church that he services, but we have had our son get baptized at that church because that's where we got married, and now we have the same priest that baptized our son and married us. He's come to our house multiple times. We've had him over for dinner. We had him bless our house, and it's just a beautiful relationship we're building with him. When you get married, you're building a whole life together, so you want that priest to also, if you can, walk those years with you. If you eventually need counseling, they're there to provide some wise counsel. The other big thing that's like a big chunk of marriage prep is your marriage prep class. We had two options. Our first option was that we could go to classes a few days a week for a certain amount of weeks, or the other option was to go away to a retreat for the weekend. I personally like the immersive experience. I like the idea that we got away. We were at this beautiful retreat house in Belton, Texas. It was so sweet and special. We really had such a good time. I actually vlogged that weekend, so I will link that vlog down in the description box below if you're curious more about what that weekend looked like. Third thing that was part of our required marriage prep class, but then we ended up going further with it, was NFP. We had to take an NFP seminar as part of our marriage prep. Then we decided to continue on with an NFP practitioner. NFP is natural family planning, and I know it can be actually very controversial in the Catholic world. There's like three groups of people. There's people that contracept, which is against our faith, and then there's people that practice NFP, and then there's people who are very anti-NFP because they feel that it's not being open to God and God's plan for your family. I really like NFP. I personally have found it very helpful for us. We knew we were going to be open to life the minute we got married. We really wanted to get pregnant, and we did. We have a little baby boy that we both adore, and it was such a blessing that we were able to get pregnant a month after getting married. But it was actually really good for both of us to learn about my cycle, because at the end of the day, marriage is two people becoming one, and that means both of your fertility, you both should have an understanding of. It is important that your husband doesn't get icked out by the bodily functions of your body. They should participate in understanding your fertility, because at the end of the day, your fertility is their fertility, and that's how they know how you guys can discern being open to life, building your family with prayer and guidance. I really loved it. We ended up continuing on with an NFP practitioner after we had our son. I have a 5-month-old. I'm much less interested in getting pregnant right now, so we're very much in the place of practicing NFP, not only for my health, but also for my mental health. It's been very life-giving for our relationship, and Matt does all the charting. The fourth thing you'll do in Catholic marriage prep is the focus test. The focus test is a personality test. You both take it separately and then you come together. We ended up doing it with our deacon. I don't know if every church does it differently, but the deacon at our church and his wife go through the results of the focus test. They share what could be a concern here. You guys have these personality differences. Matt and I come from culturally different backgrounds, which is funny because that actually never really has affected our marriage. I would say our upbringings were also very different, aside from our cultural different backgrounds, and that would probably be the biggest challenge in our marriage, is like just the way our families did things differently and creating a new family and new ways of doing things. Having the focus test, having that time with the deacon to ask questions, share concerns, really dive deeper, and maybe even identify where you might have struggles in your marriage so you can get ahead of them, start creating strategies on how to deal with differences. Formed has a marriage series called Beloved. It's so good. It's a video series. It's a bunch of different episodes. It talks about marriage and getting married and what it takes to be married, and it has really sweet stories in it. I highly recommend it. It's definitely worth watching. You can create a date night around watching it. It's multiple episodes though, so you might have to have multiple date nights to watching it. I watched it by myself and my husband watched it by himself just because of our schedules and timing. It just helped create healthy expectations of marriage. Another thing they mentioned in our marriage Catholic prep weekend that I really want to drive home is financial planning, understanding finances, talking over finances, understanding if one or more people has debt, what the debt is, how much it is, where it lives, how you guys are going to be structuring money. For my husband and I, we merged all of our bank accounts together. All of our money is fully transparent to each of us. We do budgeting together. We financially plan together. We set goals with each other. It was just really good for us both to have an understanding of what we were walking into financially, because when you get married, you're molding everything about yourself. You're giving your whole self to that person. That includes whatever financial blessings you have or burdens. I had $15,000 worth of credit card debt that I had been actively paying off while we were dating. When we had started dating, I was already actively paying that off. I actually fully had it paid off 6 months before our wedding, and that was really important to me, to have our lives not start with that kind of like stress and burden, because when you get married, especially if you're planning on being open to life, there are a lot of bills that come along with that. Having a child, you want to have a good understanding of where you're at financially and how to manage it. And a lot of people say money can make or break a relationship, and that's a tragedy, especially if you truly love someone, you're called to be married to them. Then really understanding finances and not being afraid to talk about them. I know a lot of people get very uncomfortable about talking about money, but money is just a tool like any other thing. The more comfortable you get about talking about money, the better things will go in your relationship. I'm gonna link down in the description box below different resources that help me with money. I followed the Dave Ramsey method, and that's how I was able to pay those $15,000 off. Merging our money was the best thing that we ever did. I think it really helped, and it was like really big pain to get all the bank accounts moved together, but it ended up being the best thing for us and our family, especially now that I'm moving to being a stay-at-home mom. It's so much better that we understand even that we could afford for me to stay home with our son. My next tip is to pray the rosary together. Pray the rosary together. It is the most powerful prayer you can do. It is so important to be praying the rosary together. We actually prayed the rosary a lot more in our dating and lead up to our marriage than we really have in our marriage, just because life kind of has been a little bit crazy for us. Praying the rosary together is so powerful and something that is just such a huge blessing to you and your spouse and your family. One thing that I actually did on my wedding day was I had my mom, my aunts, my friends, Matt's aunts, Matt's mom, his sisters, pray the rosary together with me before I walked down the aisle for our marriage. It was just so beautiful, all these women coming together to pray with me for this life we were about to embark on. It was one of my favorite parts of our wedding aside from the ceremony. Another form of prayer that I highly recommend leading up to your wedding is a wedding novena. We did a wedding novena leading up to our wedding. My friend Christy's parents actually wrote a beautiful wedding novena that I will try and transcribe in the description box below. I'm not sure I'll be able to because there is actually limitations on how much you can write down there, but if I can, I'll link to another wedding novena that you can pray. My last two tips are two books that I think that you should read before marriage, and that is Theology of the Body and 3 to Get Married. Theology of the Body, it's so important to understand God's design for our bodies and sexuality. I think it's really just so fruitful. I loved it so much. Reading it really transformed the way I looked at my body, the body in general, and just understanding what God created us for, the beauty of intimacy. Intimacy is a big part of marriage and coming together as a married couple. Being prepared for that and having a healthy understanding of that, and maybe also identifying what you believe about intimacy that isn't healthy that you can start addressing before you get married. It can be very overwhelming, especially if there's issues there that you're not aware of. I think it's very important to understand where somebody else is at as far as living their faith, intimacy wise. Are they watching pornography? Is masturbation an issue? Those are things that are very important to be aware of and understanding of, because that can very much affect your marriage, and it can be a huge burden on both married people, and it can be a barrier to your marriage. So it's very important to be aware of those things ahead of time. And then 3 to Get Married is just the most incredible book by Fulton Sheen. He's such an incredible saint. Well, not official saint, but in my mind, saint. He was such a prophet and understanding of humanity. 3 to Get Married is an incredible book about keeping Christ at the center of your marriage. I read 3 to Get Married when I was young in my early 20s, and I didn't really like it. I had been recommended to me by this wonderful Catholic couple that I really admire and respect. I didn't really get it because I just wasn't ready yet. And then I read it right before I got married, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. This is such a good book. So if you read it and you don't love it, it might just be that you're not ready to accept some of the messages in it. Read it again, and I'm telling you, it is life-changing. I just love it. It's so wise, so deep, and it's actually a very small book. It's like really thin and tiny. That is all my information about preparing for your wedding and Catholic marriage prep. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. I make